I asked Lorna to read a poem from Inaugural, which I think she's gonna, and then I thought, well, if she's gonna read something from her first book, I should do the same. This is a poem called The Weaver. It's from my first collection. It was Fever That Made the World. The Weaver. Inside the four-square, heavy, oak-beamed frame that supports his loom, in one corner of a cold, gray plastered room, the weaver sits alone. He smokes a pipe and does not see the hand his gaze rests on, left motionless on the shuttle, or the cloth emerging from it like a broad scarlet tongue. He wants to feel content, but each knot is a broken thread bound into the fine, smooth web. His life outside this room is snarled and ragged. If he could only sit inside his loom, as his brother does, at peace, intently dreaming what will have been his time into the careful fabric, he would not notice how these walls remind him of the blackening snow shoved to the cobbled gutters he'll walk along toward home this evening, and stop and light his pipe again, and watch the smoke curl from the glowing bowl, and then resume his work, sitting alone in the open cage of his loom. This collection is called Substrate, published it about 2 years ago. It collects work from about the past 20 years. It opens with a poem called The Resurrection of the Body, and I mentioned Israfel. The lore of angels comes from ancient Persia, from the Zoroastrians and from the predecessors of the Zoroastrians. It comes from ancient Persia into the Hebrew Bible and into Christian tradition. In that tradition, the equivalent of Gabriel, who blows the trumpet of the last, he blows the last trumpet and says that time shall be no more and roll up the scroll of time. And that angel in Persian tradition is named Israfel. The resurrection of the body. Naked as the day they were born, the first time. The newly resurrected blink awake, wide-eyed, and caper, innocent under heaven, in the final clarity of eternal everyday, like nudists without tennis shoes, unstartled to resume bodies homely as the first, lumpish and pointy-elbowed, adult but not worn, like a loved coat remade, a perfect fit, comfortable as an animal with a soul at home, entirely instinct with uncareful grace. The sting of seasons, sated at the feast where every head is numbered, pleasure's instrument, and slave to pain. Luck's buried hook and a fatal barb of risk, blunted this time, lost in the blast this morning from the horn of Israfel. And I'll read a new poem, fairly new poem. This is the view of San Francisco from the Berkeley Bay shore, and it's called Figment. The silhouettes of bicyclists fly south after sunset in pairs and alone along the bay shore. Dusk is closing in. Exposed above slack water at low tide, the canted, maskless hulks of scuttled small craft, nose down in bottom ooze, stems lifted, sterns lifted, leering. Across the bay, a rust rose afterglow surmounts. I'm going to start over with this. This is the first time I read it aloud, so excuse me. Figment. The silhouettes of bicyclists fly south after sunset in pairs and alone. along the bay shore. Dusk is closing in. Exposed above slack water at low tide, the canted, mastless hulks of scuttled small craft, nose down, in bottom ooze, sterns lifted, leering. Across the bay, a rust-rose afterglow surmounted with a band of murky turquoise deploys above the towers of San Francisco to meet the deeper indigo of nearing dark, which Venus pierces, her naked point higher nightly, evening star, goddess, oh sovereign figment glinting like a nail, against which I keep hammering my skull. I'll read one more and then back to you. And this is called Seamstress, and it was inspired by a mutual friend of Lorna's and mine, Cynthia Ponce, who is a member from way back in Teatro Campesino, and also a kindergarten teacher. She teaches in Hollister. This is called The Seamstress, Dia de los Muertos. The Seamstress. Knelt in the middle of the kitchen floor at midnight. There's only so much you can do to mend the skeleton, spread eagle on the linoleum, painted in faded day glow on a black leotard. The fabric stretches over time. The fibers strain and give and never spring back all the way. Needle and thread stitch up the raveled sleeve. A sponge blots fresh fluorescence onto spine and rib cage. But light leaks through the brittle weave. The needle's eye grows dimmer, the grasp less sure, and joints ache on the cold floor, down again on hands and knees to see the kindergartners dance in the bones of